Have you ever felt a room turn quiet in a way that hurts? Not the calm kind. The kind that tells you everyone has already decided who you are. Sarah Miller felt that silence wrap around her like cold iron as she stood on the auction block. Her fingers clenched tight around the handle of a Christmas basket that held her last hope. The town hall of Oak Haven was packed, warm with bodies and thick with smells of roasted ham, cider, and pine wreaths. Snow pressed against the windows from the outside, 3 feet deep in places, the kind of winter that punished anyone already on their knees. Inside, laughter and chatter filled the room until Sarah stepped forward. Then the noise thinned like breath sucked out of a lung. She wore a faded gray calico dress, neat but worn thin at the elbows. It was the only decent dress she had left since Thomas died 8 months earlier. Thomas had been a miller, a good man with bad luck, and a heart that failed him too young. He left behind a half-built barn, rocky land, and a quiet house that still smelled like him. He also left Sarah alone in a town that had never been kind to widows. This night was the annual Christmas box social, the biggest event of the year in Oak Haven. Women packed lunch baskets for 2, tying them up with ribbons and secrets. Men bid on the baskets, and whoever paid the most got the meal and the company of the woman who made it. The money was said to go to the church roof that everyone knew followed power more than prayer. Sarah knew what her basket really was. It was not just food. It was a plea. She had used the last of her flour to bake the biscuits. She had traded away her wedding ring polish for a piece of venison to make the pie. The jar of peaches inside was from 2 summers ago, saved for a time she never thought would come. If this basket sold, even for a little, she could delay the bank another month, maybe 2. Whispers slid through the crowd as she stood there. "Look at her," a woman hissed from the front row, hiding behind a fan, wearing gray to Christmas. "You would think she would have the decency to stay home. She cannot afford to." Another voice replied, soft but sharp. "I heard the bank is coming for the Miller place in the spring. She's probably hoping for a husband to pay her debts." Sarah heard every word. She lifted her chin anyway. She would not cry. Not here. The auctioneer, Jedodiah Smith, wiped sweat from his brow and raised his gavel. He had shouted bids with joy for the mayor's daughter earlier. Now his voice sounded thin. "Next basket," he said, "by Mrs. Sarah Miller." No applause followed. Just that silence again. "Do I hear 50 cents? Jedediah asked. Nothing. Men stared at their boots. Young cowhands who usually made sport of these events suddenly found the ceiling interesting. To bid on Sarah Miller was to invite bad luck. She was the widow who refused to sell her land cheap, the woman the mayor did not like. So Jedediah cleared his throat. 25 cents. The wind outside howled, rattling the window panes. Inside, no one moved. Sarah's grip tightened on the basket until the wicker dug into her skin. Her cheeks burned. She prayed silently, not for pride, just mercy. One bid, just one. In the front row, Mayor Josiah Higgins leaned back in his chair, thumbs hooked into his vest. His wide mustache twitched with a smile that never reached his eyes. He looked straight at Sarah. The message was clear. Give up the land, and this ends. 10 cents, Jedediah tried. A ripple of laughter passed through the women. Sarah felt something break inside her, quiet and final. She prepared to turn away, to walk back into the snow with her basket and her shame. "Going once," Jedediah said, lifting the gavel. "Going twice." The gavel began to fall. The doors at the back of the hall flew open with a violent screech. Cold air rushed in, carrying snow with smoke and the smell of the wild. Candles flickered hard, nearly going out. Every head turned. A massive figure stood in the doorway, blocking the light. He wore a heavy buffalo coat, snow clinging to his broad shoulders and thick, dark beard. A rifle hung from his shoulder, and a long knife rested at his hip. He looked less like a man and more like something pulled straight from the mountains. Elias Burke had arrived. The room went still in a new way. Mothers pulled children closer. Men straightened without meaning to. Elias Burke was not part of Oak Haven society. He lived high in the Bitterroot Peaks, trapping and hunting. Stories followed him like shadows. Some said he had killed the grizzly with his bare hands. Others said he carried gold or ghosts in equal measure. He stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the mayor. His dark eyes locked onto the stage, onto Sarah. He walked down the center aisle. Chairs scraped back as people made room, afraid to touch him. His spurs jingled with each step, slow and heavy. He stopped 10 feet from the stage and looked at Jedediah. "Is the basket for sale?" he asked. His voice was low, steady, and carried through the room. Well, Jedediah stammered. "Yes, the bidding is open." "It is over." Mayor Higgins snapped, standing up. "No one bid. This is a private event. You are interrupting." Elias turned his head slowly and looked at the mayor. He said nothing. He just stared. Higgins's face flushed. Then he sat back down. Elias looked back at Sarah for a brief moment. The hard edge in his eyes softened. He saw her trembling hands, the frayed cuffs of her dress, the way she stood alone. $5, Elias said. The room exploded with sound. $5, someone shrieked. That is madness. $5 was weeks of wages for a cowhand, enough to feed a family for a month. It was not just a bid. It was a declaration. Jedediah's gavel shook in his hand. $5, he repeated weakly. Any other bids? No one spoke. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He loosened the string and poured 5 heavy gold coins into his palm. They glinted in the candlelight as he tossed them onto the table. The sound rang loud and final. Sold, Elias said. He did not wait. He walked up onto the stage. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Elias stopped in front of her. He smelled of pine and colder. He was terrifying, yes, but when he looked at her, he did not look like a buyer. He looked like a man who had made a choice. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and steady. "I hope you are hungry," she whispered. "I would ride through hell for that basket," he said loud enough for the front row to hear. He led her off the stage down the aisle, past the stunned faces of Oak Haven. Outside, the cold hit hard, but Sarah barely felt it. Elias helped her into a sturdy sleigh hitched to a powerful black stallion. He covered them with a thick buffalo robe and flicked the reins. They rode away from the town, lights up toward the ridge. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something other than fear settle in her chest. They stopped at a clearing overlooking the valley. Elias took the basket and opened it carefully. Sarah watched, ashamed of how small it looked in his hands. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "It is not much." Elias broke a biscuit, tasted it, and closed his eyes. "This tastes like home," he said. They shared the food in silence. That felt kind. When she asked why he had done it, his answer stunned her. He had known Thomas. He had promised to deliver a map that hinted at gold on her land. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, Sarah realized the truth. The land the mayor wanted was not worthless. It was dangerous to own. When Elias brought her home, he warned her to lock her doors. He rode away into the dark, leaving her with fear and hope tangled together. That night, a pounding came at her door. Mayor Higgins had come with the sheriff. He gave her until noon the next day to pay the bank or lose everything. After they left, Sarah collapsed into her chair, shaking. She was ruined. Then she heard wood splitting outside. Elias had returned. As she watched him work by moonlight, shadows moved beyond the trees. Men with rifles. Hired men. Sarah grabbed Thomas's old shotgun and ran into the snow. "Elias," she screamed. "Behind you." The night shattered with gunfire, And the war Elias Burke had promised had begun. The gunshot cracked through the frozen night like the sky breaking apart. Snow exploded from the woodpile where Elias had stood a heartbeat before. He dropped instantly, not in fear, but in instinct, rolling as the bullet tore through the space he had just occupied. Sarah did not think. She did not hesitate. Barefoot in the snow, she raised Thomas's old double-barreled shotgun, her hands steady in a way they had never been before. "Elias, behind you!" she screamed again. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Elias moved like something born for violence. He grabbed the splitting axe, spun, and hurled it into the dark tree-line. A scream followed, sharp and sudden, then silence. "Get down." Elias roared. Sarah pulled the trigger. The shotgun bucked hard against her shoulder, fire bursting from the barrel. She was not aiming to kill. She was aiming to stop them. Branches shattered where the shadows had been hiding. Men cursed and scrambled. "They sent men," Sarah gasped. "The mayor sent men." "I know," Elias said grimly, "and they will not stop." Two figures broke from the trees and ran. A third tried to flank Elias, but Elias was already moving. He vanished into the brush, fast and deadly. Fists hit flesh. Snow churned. Then one man stumbled back into the moonlight, blood on his face, terror in his eyes. He ran. Elias emerged moments later, dragging his leg. "You are hit," Sarah cried. "Just grazed," he said through clenched teeth. But the dark stain spreading on his trousers said otherwise. A glow flared in the distance, orange against black. "My barn," Sarah whispered. "They're trying to flush us out," Elias said. "We cannot stay." He helped her harness the stallion with one hand, blood dripping into the snow. Flames licked the sky behind them as they fled into the trees, Elias steering the sleigh off the road deeper into the mountains. They rode until Sarah could no longer feel her feet, and Elias's breathing turned ragged. He finally pulled the sleigh under a rocky overhang hidden by spruce. When Elias stepped down, his leg buckled. Sarah caught him. "You are not fine," she said firmly. "Sit." She lit a small lantern and tore fabric from her petticoat, binding the wound with shaking hands. The bullet had torn through muscle. Deep, but not deadly. "You shoot straight," Elias said quietly. "I had to learn," she replied. Thomas could not hold a gun at the end. They sat wrapped together in the buffalo robe, the wind howling outside. Elias spoke of his past, of losing his family to fever, of choosing the mountains over grief. Sarah listened, understanding blooming between them. "I have the money," Elias finally said. "Enough to clear your debt 3 times over." "But the sheriff," Sarah said, "they will kill you before you reach the bank." Elias looked at her, eyes sharp despite the pain. "Then we do not walk in like hunted men. We walk in like ghosts." By dawn, a plan was set. At 8:30 the next morning, Sarah rode alone back into Oak Haven. Smoke still hung in the air from her burned barn. People watched her pass, whispering. She stopped at the general store where old Mr. Henderson stood behind the counter. "I need to send a telegram," Sarah said loudly. "I am selling the farm to the mayor. I am leaving." Relief washed through the room. The widow had broken. Sarah leaned in and slid a gold coin across the counter. "Help me," she whispered. Henderson's eyes flicked to the coin, then to her face. He nodded once. "Tell them I will say goodbye at the church at noon," Sarah said. Word spread fast. At noon, the town square filled. Higgins waited smugly at the bank. Then the church bells rang wild and frantic. "Fire," someone shouted. At the livery, the sheriff and deputies ran. The bank steps emptied, and Elias Burke rode into town like judgment itself. Bareback, wounded, roaring, he charged down Main Street. Sarah stepped from the alley beside the bank, shotgun raised. "Do not," she said coldly. Higgins froze. Elias kicked the bank doors open and slammed a heavy sack onto the counter. Gold spilled everywhere. "500 to clear the Miller mortgage," Elias said, "and 500 more to register a mining claim." Sarah Miller Higgins screamed. The sheriff burst in. Sarah stepped between them. "You will have to shoot me too," she said. The town filled the doorway. The truth poured out. The fire, the eviction, the lies. The sheriff lowered his rifle. The clerk weighed the gold. Paid in full, he whispered. Elias collapsed moments later, blood loss finally winning. The town carried him out not as a criminal, but as a man who had changed everything. That night, as snow fell soft and clean, Sarah sat by Elias's bed, afraid to blink. And when he woke, the question came, "Will you stay?" she asked. For the first time in years, Elias Burke did not look toward the mountains. He looked home. The farmhouse was quiet in a way Sarah had not known since before Thomas died. Not the empty quiet that echoed with loss, but a living stillness filled with breath, firelight, and the steady rise and fall of Elias Burke's chest. Snow fell softly outside, covering the scars left by fire and gunmen. Christmas Eve had come without music or celebration, but the house was warm. Elias lay in Thomas's old bed, bandaged and pale, his massive frame somehow softened by sleep. The doctor had come and gone, shaking his head in disbelief, muttering about stubborn men and stronger women. Sarah sat beside the bed, holding a mug of broth she had reheated twice without realizing it. She watched Elias sleep, afraid that if she looked away, he might vanish back into the mountains like a dream she did not deserve. When his eyes finally opened, they were dark but clear. "You are still here," he said, his voice rough. "Where else would I be?" Sarah replied softly. He tried to sit up and failed, pain flashing across his face. "I should go," he said after a moment. "As soon as I can stand." The words landed heavy. "Go where?" Sarah asked. "Back to the high country," Elias said, staring at the fire instead of her. "I did what I came to do. You are safe now. You have your land. You do not need a wounded mountain man weighing you down." Sarah stood so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Weighing me down," she repeated. "I am not built for towns," Elias said quietly. "I do not know how to sit at tables or smile at neighbors. Folks will talk. They already are. You deserve peace." Sarah stepped closer until he had to look at her. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I stood on a stage and begged this town to see me," she said. "The mayor tried to break me. The bank tried to erase me." She took his hand, rough and scarred, and pressed it to her chest. "One man walked into that room and paid a fortune, not for food, but for my dignity. That man chopped my wood when killers hid in the trees. That man bled for my home." Tears slipped free, but she did not wipe them away. "I do not need a gentleman," Sarah said. "I need you." Elias's breath hitched. Years of solitude cracked open in his eyes. "I do not have much to offer," he whispered. "That is a lie," Sarah said. "You offered everything when it mattered." He cupped her face with a trembling hand, thumb brushing away her tears. "Then I will stay," he said, "if you will have me." "I already do," she replied. They were married 3 days later in the same parlor, where Sarah once wept alone. There was no minister. The roads were buried under snow. Mr. Henderson read from a Bible. The sheriff signed as witness, leaving his gun belt by the door. Elias wore his cleanest flannel. Sarah wore her gray dress, pinned with evergreen and holly. The town watched in quiet awe as the widow and the mountain man joined hands. Spring came slow, but sure. The land revealed its secret. Gold glittered in North Creek, just as Thomas had believed. They did not sell. They worked. They rebuilt the barn stronger than before, painted red against the green hills. They built a long table on the porch where travelers always found a meal. Mayor Higgins left Oak Haven in disgrace. He died poor and forgotten, a man who chased gold but never understood its worth. Sarah and Elias grew old together. 3 children filled the house with noise and laughter. Every year at Christmas, Elias poured 5 gold coins onto the table and smiled. "Nobody bid on the basket," he would say. Sarah would cover his hand and answer, "Nobody but the one who mattered."